This year's primary elections are going to look a little different. What you need to know about mail-in ballots. That's today on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
Instead of heading to the ballot box, Nevadans will be headed to the mailbox on June 9th. In an effort to prevent the spread of COVID-19, our state has opted for a mail-in primary. Democrats have taken issue with this year's process, arguing the election isn't equitable. Republicans are arguing against the blanket mail-in ballots, saying it could lead to an increase in voter fraud. On today's Nevada Week, we are talking with representatives from both sides of the aisle. Plus, the Secretary of State's office will break down what voters need to know ahead of Election Day. To get a rounded discussion on this voter issue, we are joined by Shelby Wiltz, Caucus Director for the Nevada State Democratic Party, Pauline Eun Lee, President of the Nevada Republican Club, and Wayne Thorley, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I want to get started right away by just talking about how the local and national GOP members have voiced their concerns on fraud in a mail-in ballot election. We have reached out to the Nevada GOP. They did not respond to our invitation to be on the show. Clark County GOP could not be on during this recording, but we are very happy to have on the Republican Club and get more of a individual perspective of the Republican Club members on this. Pauline, can you give us some specifics on what the concerns are related to fraud here?
Well, first of all, mail-in ballot voting is problematic for several reasons. Number one, you have the problem with ballot harvesting, and that's where you have a party or a person or a group of people taking a group of ballots and filling in the ballots for the person, and ballot harvesting is actually illegal. It's illegal in the state of Nevada. Secondly, you have now with 200,000 inactive voters getting ballots, which was approved by the county commission. You have ballots that are being sent to residences where these people are no longer present, and that's a real problem. And I can attest to seeing photos of ballots just bunches of ballots being thrown at or at the floor of apartment complexes. And these are ballots supposedly for residences who no longer live in these apartment buildings. And that's a real problem. And then, of course, with the mail-in ballots, you have a signature. You have to put your signature on the outside of the envelope. And that's a problem because now you're giving your signature, which is supposed to be verified by the Secretary of State, to anyone, and anyone can just lift off your signature. And if they get a hold of your checks or if there are official documents that need to be signed, they now have a copy of your signature. So the Republican Party does have and has had a problem with these mail-in ballots.
Now, Wayne, I'm sorry, Pauline, sorry to cut you off. Wayne, so three things here: ballot harvesting, inactive voters going out, and potential signatures could potentially open up cases for fraud. What are some of the safeguards we have at the state level to make sure that none of those are leading to any type of fraudulent type of votes here?
Sure. Ballot harvesting is illegal in Nevada. It is punishable as a felony. So it is a severe crime, a very severe punishment for engaging in ballot harvesting. If anybody is aware of that going on, we would like to know, and we will make sure that law is enforced. That we believe is an important law to have on the books to prevent fraudulent practices related to mail ballots. Nobody can just pick up a ballot off the ground and vote that ballot. There are many safeguards in place, primarily being the signature that we require to be included on the ballot return envelope. Every single ballot is checked to make sure that signature matches a signature on file for that voter. If it does not match, or if the voter forgets to sign the ballot return envelope, then the ballot is not counted. and it will only be counted once the voter verifies through the signature cure process that it is actually them that voted that ballot. You cannot return more than one ballot in a ballot return envelope. If you do, they are all voided. Ballots are barcoded, envelopes are barcoded. We can track them through the mail stream. It is very difficult for someone to vote more than once using a mail ballot, or to vote somebody else's ballot that's not theirs. There is no indication that mail balloting leads to massive amounts of voter fraud.
Now, Wayne, I was looking at my own ballot, and the signature is on the outside of the envelope that you mail in with your personal, your full name and then your address as well. Why is that signature, the verification signature, on the outside of the envelope?
It doesn't have to be. That's a county decision. In Washoe County, for example, the signature is tucked under the flap, the envelope flap, so that once the voter signs it and seals the envelope, it is hidden. If anybody's concerned about their signature being viewed by somebody that it shouldn't, you do not have to return your ballot by mail. You can drop your ballot off in person and avoid the mail stream altogether. Signatures, however, if you sign, for example, if you sign an initiative petition or any type of election petition, whether it's an independent candidate petition or a recall petition, those are all public record. So voter signatures are already in the public record.
Shelby, I want to address more the inactive voters that we've already talked about here. The Nevada Dems do have a pending lawsuit against the state. One of the demands that are on that list in that lawsuit are inactive voters having ballots sent to the inactive voters. In Clark County, we've already seen the policy has been shifted to where we do have inactive voters that are receiving ballots. That's what Pauline was referencing. Shelby, I wanted to ask you, first off, just why are inactive votes so important to Nevada Dems particularly?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And the reason that they're so important is because there's really no difference between an inactive voter and an active voter. Both groups of voters are eligible to participate in the election process. And so it's really been important for us to ensure that both groups of voters are getting a ballot just as they would be able to show up in person, were we not in this time and needing to think about how to ensure we have a safe election process. And so we feel strongly that both active and inactive voters are receiving a ballot in order to allow for equal participation for all people that are eligible to participate in the election.
And then one of the other demands in that lawsuit is modification of ballot signature matching policies here. Can you give us some specifics on exactly what the Nevada Dems would like to see changed to that policy? And again, why is that?
Yeah, so the two things that are pretty important for us here is that one, that we have a uniform process for reviewing signatures, and that those signatures are reviewed by more than two people. And the reason for that, and the reason it's important, is because when a voter mails in their ballot, and again, for context here, a majority of Nevadans vote early in person in most elections in Nevada. And so this is a new process for folks. And so when people are voting by mail, we want to make sure that there's a rigorous standard for reviewing those signatures, and that signatures are reviewed by more than two people before they are rejected, so that there is less of a chance that voters are needing to go through the process of having to cure their ballot. The other reason that it's important to us is because when you look at states with large vote by mail programs, there tends to be higher rates of rejection for communities of color specifically. And so we are also invested in ensuring that that's not something we see replicated in Nevada.
Now, Wayne, in addition to fraud, the other risks, some of the public concern be around system breaches, especially if we're talking about a mail-in vote versus an in-person vote, and potentially inaccurate counts. Can you give us some idea, some insight in what safeguards, and maybe even before that, what are the actual risks of inaccurate counts or system breaches in our system here in the state?
Sure. So there is a real risk of any information technology system being accessed by unauthorized users. We know that risk exists, and we have put a lot of procedures in place. And mail voting versus in-person voting on voting doesn't change that risk significantly. It is still there. Mail ballots are not hand counted. They are counted using scanners. If the scanner cannot determine the voter's intent, then it does go to a bipartisan review board to review for the voters to determine voters' intent, but the vast majority of them can be read by scanners. All the voting equipment that's in use in the state of Nevada is federally certified, meets or exceeds the federal standards. It's independently tested by the Gaming Control Board to make sure that it's suitable for use in elections in Nevada. We do auditing and testing both before the election and after the election to make sure the equipment properly. We do post-election audits where we randomly select the paper vote record from certain machines and then compare that to what the machine said the vote was to make sure that it's accurate. So we know the risk. It's not going away as more and more election technology is introduced to the process. We need to be vigilant, and we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that the voters can have confidence that their ballots are counted accurately.
And if you are, if you are a member of the public and you are interested or concerned maybe about fraud or potential inaccurate counts, are there opportunities for you to observe this process at all?
There are.
And what would those be?
The Mail Ballot Counting Board, the bipartisan board that oversees the counting mail ballots. That begins 4 days before election day, which is June 9th. Any member of the public who is interested in observing that process, I encourage them to contact their county election official to know the time and location, and they're certainly eligible to observe that.
Now, Wayne, meat and potatoes here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the key how-tos. What is it that we really need to know as we're filling out our mail-in ballots?
So is the deadline. All ballots must be posted by June 9th, which is election day, if you plan on returning your ballot by mail. If you would like to drop your ballot off in person, it must be dropped off by 7 p.m. on election day, which is again June 9th. It's important that you sign your ballot return envelope as previously discussed. If it's not signed or if the signature doesn't match, you will be given an opportunity to correct that. But to avoid any delays, it is important to do that. Use ink pen. Avoid using felt. Do not include more than one ballot in your ballot return envelope. If you make a mistake, you can request a new ballot, or you can simply cross out the name of the candidate that you did not intend to vote for, and then fill in the bubble next to the candidate that you do intend to vote for.
In addition to the mail-in system, of course, there are in-person polling locations, one in each county. Clark County has 3 now. How do we find out information about where those locations are?
Sure, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and find the polling locations in all the counties. In the majority of the counties, the polling location is at the county election official's office. Usually in the small counties, that's the courthouse. In Clark County, that's at their warehouse in North Las Vegas. In Washoe County, it's at the county complex near downtown. During early voting, which is going on right now, the county has 1 polling place open. And as you mentioned, on election day, Clark County will have 2 additional polling locations open on election day for a total of 3.
Now, Pauline, if you are having trouble with filling out the ballot, you've got some questions, you need some help, Republican Club has a lot of resources. Could we potentially contact you regardless of party and we could get some help from you?
Absolutely. You can actually go to our Facebook, which is Nevada Republican Club, and we have a video posted up, and it's a nonpartisan video. We're just telling people how to fill out their ballot. It's not intuitive, because you have to take your ballot, fill it in with the circle with either a black or blue pen, not a pencil. This is not a Scantron test. And you have to fold it and put it into an envelope before you can actually put it into the outside envelope. or you can go to our Facebook page, which is Nevada Republican Club. We've also sent out in our newsletter places, emails and websites for if you see that there are election issues.
And Shelby, same thing. There are a lot of resources on the Nevada Dems site. What do you have if we need some guidance on just simply how to fill the ballot out?
Yeah, so we have two really great resources for you. One, we've created an easy FAQ page, just documenting some good questions and answers about the election process overall, the primary, dates and deadlines, and then some FAQs around the ballot. And so people can find that by going to nvdems/resources. If you go to nvdems.com, you can also navigate your way to that page. In addition to that, we provide another service each cycle through a 24-hour hotline that's available. And so folks are also welcome to call our voter protection hotline to help get questions answered about how to fill out their ballot, or if they're having any other issues related to the voting process. And that number is 888-525-VOTE or 888-525-8683.
Wayne, also, in addition to all the resources that we've talked about, what does the Secretary of State's office have if we need some additional resources or guidance?
We've created a website. It's mailitinnevada.com. Again, that's mailitinnevada.com. That has lots of resources about the primary election. There's about a 3-minute video that gives instructions for how to vote your mail ballot. There's a frequently asked questions page. There's a page where we respond to common myths about mail voting. Deadlines are on that page. So any information that a voter could need about the primary election is on the website, mailitinnevada.com.
Now let's talk a little bit about candidate information here now, Pauline. Of course, we're all dealing with the drastic changes to our lives during COVID-19. Candidates campaigning is no different here. What kind of resources or tools is the Republican Club recommending we can go to and get information on candidates to kind of inform the decisions we're making here?
Well, for many years, the Nevada Republican Club's mission has been to educate our members and to educate the public about civic issues. And for the last 10 years, we've had always some kind of a recommendation list, and here's a copy of our list, where we are recommending judicial candidates based on really 5 pillars of honesty, integrity, competence, and experience in courtroom demeanor. These are not just Republican registered candidates, but these are candidates who we believe will uphold the law and who will strictly construe the law based on how it's written and the intent of the actual legislators. This list it's on our website, which is www.nevadarepublicanclub.com. And it's also, we've distributed about 20,000 of these judicial recommendations lists to everyone. And so it's not as partisan as people think it is. It's actually about electing good officials, which is very important for our judicial system. And we're recommending those people based on really their competency. And we want Nevada to be a place where we have good, competent judges.
And Shelby, same thing here. Let's talk more about nonpartisan information here. Are you recommending any resources that we have out there that are really robust in giving us all the information we want to inform our voting decisions here?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So the NV Dems does not endorse in primaries where Democrats are running against other Democrats, and so we won't have that information posted on our own page. But we would I think it's important. We think it's important that anyone who's participating in this primary is well informed and is taking the time to do research. And so a few things that we would recommend. Obviously, connect with your family, your friends, your neighbors, folks who are engaged and who are participating, and ask for their advice and thoughts. We would also recommend going to all of the candidates' websites reading up on them and getting more familiar with them. And then the other thing we would recommend is getting involved with with your local Democratic club or folks who are engaged in your community and learning more about the candidates. That way, oftentimes, local clubs, county clubs may provide additional information on the candidates that will be on the ballot.
We've talked a lot about the mail-in ballot. Let's talk a little bit more about the turnout here and what we think turnout might be in mostly mail-in ballot election here. Wayne, maybe you can provide us some historical perspective first off on what previous primaries have been like as far as what are some of the numbers here in turnout.
Historically, turnout for primary elections in Nevada has been low. Recently, we've been averaging about 20% turnout for primary elections. Going back over a decade, see some turnout for primary elections closer to about 30%, so still pretty low. States that have switched from majority voting by mail have all seen a turnout increase. So I'm anticipating at least a slight increase in turnout for this election, something above 20%. But honestly, since this is our first time doing a mostly vote by mail election, not sure what turnout will hit.
Pauline, what do you think? What are you projecting? You projecting a higher or lower amount of Republican turnout here in the primaries?
I'm going to actually project a higher turnout. I'm hoping that's a higher turnout. I know that a lot of our colleagues are planning to actually drop off their mail-in ballots as opposed to sending it through the mail. As much as I really like the Postal Service, there's a lot of distrust about whether or not the ballots will actually get to the Secretary of State. It doesn't matter what party you are because it doesn't say an outside ballot. But a lot of people will be dropping off their ballots. We'll see what happens. It's hard to predict. We've never done this before.
It is hard to predict, and in addition to maybe some of the mistrust on how those ballots are getting there, of course, we're in a different political and economic climate than we were 2 months ago just because of where we are with COVID that might allow for more engagement. At least the hope is on our political side here. Shelby, same question. Are you projecting, you think, a higher percentage than usual here?
Yeah, our goal at the party has always been to expand voter participation, and with moving to this mostly mail-in process, we hope that will be the case. We saw increased voter participation in our caucus, and so we're hoping that momentum carries over to the primary, that folks continue to be engaged and participate at higher levels than what we've seen in the past, and then ultimately would love to see that increased participation and momentum carry through November as well. So, we're not in the business of speculation, but we do hope that the added in-person locations in Clark County, ensuring that we've got ballots going out to active and inactive voters, and making sure that we've got these hygienic in-person polling options for people, and the drop-off option will be a good step in the right direction towards making sure that we can see increased participation in this primary.
And speaking of in-person voters, let's remember that we are in phase 2, or we're moving into phase 2 at time of recording here. One of the restrictions that's being relaxed is the amount of people that can be in one space at one time, from 10 to 50. Wayne, I'm assuming we are getting close to June 9th. I would assume we're not going to have more in-person polling stations open because of that restriction relaxed. But let me ask you, is there any potential for that?
So there isn't at this point a potential for increasing polling locations. Of course, we had to make these decisions back in March when there were a lot of unknowns about how long the pandemic would last, how long the stay-at-home order risks associated with those risks still exist. Matter of fact, Clark County had an election worker test positive for the COVID-19 virus on Monday. And so we know the risk is still out there, which is why we made the decision to conduct this election mostly by mail. I like to compare the election apparatus in the state to a large ocean liner. It does not turn quickly. Elections are not like a pop-up business that gets set up overnight. It takes months and months of planning and preparation.
Well, let's move on to the general election then. With that same discussion here, we are in phase 2. In the next coming weeks, more than likely, we're going to see phase 3 and phase 4, which is going to be almost a complete reopening, if not a complete reopening. But experts are telling us those risks that we are confronting right now will still be present in November. With that said, Wayne, do you anticipate we might have an all mail-in ballot general election process here?
I don't. The decision to conduct the all-mail for the primary election only. The plan is to move forward with a general election under normal circumstances. Of course, any voter in the state can always request an absentee ballot for it. They don't have to provide a valid reason. So voters are interested in participating that way for the general election. That's certainly allowable and a valid voting option.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this week on Nevada Week. For any of the resources discussed on this show, please visit our website at vegaspbs.org/Nevada-week. You can also find us on social media at Nevada Week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay strong.